All right, welcome everybody. In this video, I want to go through how we can import multiple files, in this case, CSV files, and import them into a single data frame, a single tibble using the readr package in R. So for example, imagine, you've got some sales data. In each month, you have a different file that includes that sales data. So you have a file for January, a file for February, file for March. And what you would like to do is read all three of these CSV files together and just have one sales file that includes sales data for all 3 months, all in the same data frame. So let me first say what we can do is create a vector of the files that we want to import. I've got 3 of them. So I'm going to enter each of the files, that the name of the file, in quotes. So if the file is stored on my computer, I would just enter the file name. If the file is stored someplace online, then I enter the address to that file, the link to that file. So here I've got sales for January, February, and March. So rather than enter one file, I just enter my files as a vector of character strings, which each string is the name of the file, or possibly the path and name of the file. And I have an optional argument here. I don't need to enter this, but I have an ID argument that I can use. We'll see what this does. I'm just going to run this code cell over here. And everything created fine. So just keep in mind that all of this messaging here, it's not an error. It's not even a warning. It's just the output I get from the read_CSV function. I get some output from that function that summarizes how the import stage went. Down below, I'm looking at the actual file that was the data frame that is created. So these rows were merged in from the January CSV. These observations came from the February CSV file. These came from the March CSV file. And the fact that I use this ID argument means it's going to create a new column, the very first column, with the name, whatever I decide to name it. I named it month ID here. And it tells us which file it came from. And so sometimes that's going to be really useful if you wanted to know what file did this observation come from. So you can choose to do that. You can also choose not to do that if you don't want that information there. So that's it. So I can import things that way. I just want to emphasize here that if you don't like this sort of layout, what I could do is instead of storing that information, the name of the files, separately, I could just enter that as a vector. So I could enter the name of the 3 files as a vector and then enter the ID argument if I wanted to do that. And this would work just as well. So I don't have to set up a vector that I call save files that I then input into this. It's just a nice way of doing it to make the read CSV command a little more concise. But this command down here does the same exact thing. And one last thing to mention is it might be nice to keep this column of IDs to know which file it came from, because sometimes your file name might have an identifier in it that might actually be a variable that we could encode. So maybe, you can imagine not having the month column here and the month column only being encoded in the file from which we are importing the data from. And from these file names, let's say I wanted to create a month variable. Maybe I didn't know the month from this one. So what I could do is there is a nice function which is called str underscore replace underscore all. So this is string replace all. This comes from the stringer package. This is another core tidyverse package. So as long as you've loaded the tidyverse, you have access to the stringer package. And I'm not going to get into all of the details of stringer, but stringer is a useful package for working with character strings, which is what I want to do right now. These are all character strings. So what I want to do is go into this month ID vector and say any character string which is equal to this matches all of that. That's where the all comes from. For any string that matches all of that, replace it with the string O1. For any string that equals this file name, replace it with O2. This file name, I want to go ahead and replace it with O3. And that function name is called string replace all. And the first argument is the vector that I want to do this to. In this case, you could enter a data frame. Here's the vector of month IDs that I want to apply this transformation to. And then the second argument is a vector that describes all of the transformations, all of the replaces that you're going to do. And this converted all of those kind of file names into month IDs. Okay. And so again, we had a month column initially, so you probably didn't need to do this. I'm just trying to illustrate how sometimes you might have file names that you actually want to convert into a variable that might be descriptive, and the stringer package might be a nice way for you to do that. If you're curious what goes on in the stringer package, check it out. It's a cool package. Okay, so we'll stop here in this video. Thanks, everybody.